Hi, I'm Zoe. I landed in New York thinking I'd surprise my brother, but the surprise was on me. He was on life support, alone, unresponsive, and his wife. She was laughing in a champagne dress at a rooftop club, pretending I didn't exist. They said I was just the sister. But the photos where I'd been cropped out, the voicemail I was never meant to hear, the letter he tried to send me before he slipped into silence. Why did they work so hard to erase me? And what was she so afraid I'd find? The voicemail came in sometime around 4 p.m., but I didn't see it until nearly 6. I'd spent most of the day heads down editing a memoir for a retired schoolteacher in Wisconsin. It was the kind of work that demanded quiet and concentration, both of which had come in short supply lately. My inbox had been a mess, and my phone was set to silent. When I finally glanced down and noticed the blinking notification, I expected it to be spam or another political robocall. Instead, it was from Mrs. Berman, my brother's elderly neighbor in New York. "Hi Zoe, it's Darlene. I hope this isn't out of line, but I wasn't sure if anyone had told you. I thought you'd want to know. Tyler's in the hospital. ICU. It's been a few days now. I just assumed you already knew. I'm so sorry." I replayed the message 3 times. ICU? A few days? Nobody told me. My hands were suddenly too cold to type. My spine locked into place. I stared at the screen like it might correct itself, but the message stayed the same. Tyler. ICU. No one called. Not Dad. Not his wife. Not even a text from anyone who might have once called themselves family. Within 15 minutes, I had booked a one-way ticket to New York. The next flight out was in 3 hours. I shoved some clothes into my carry-on, my fingers fumbling with zippers and toothpaste tubes. The act of packing, once so mundane, felt foreign. I couldn't think straight. My brain kept looping 2 thoughts. What happened to Tyler? And why the hell did no one think I deserved to know? It was already dark when I reached the airport. Portland's rain had followed me to the terminal, soaking the cuffs of my jeans as I darted from the parking garage. I didn't have time to park properly. I left the car in long term and texted my landlord about collecting mail. On the flight, I couldn't sleep. I didn't even try. The steady thrum of the engine and the distant snoring of the man beside me blurred into a haze. I stared blankly at the back of the seat in front of me, watching the in-flight map crawl its way across the country. Each blinking pixel brought me closer to a brother I hadn't seen in almost a year, and possibly wouldn't see again. By the time we landed at JFK, it was just after 7 a.m. A cold fog hung over the runway like a bad omen. I grabbed a taxi and told the driver the hospital's name. He didn't ask questions, just nodded and drove. The city was waking up around us. Delivery trucks, bundled-up commuters, street vendors setting up coffee carts. Everything pulsed with life while my heart sat heavy in my chest, like it was waiting to break. As we pulled up to Mount Sinai, I gripped my phone tighter. The screen still showed nothing from Sable. No missed calls, no messages, not even a passive-aggressive group chat update. Just silence. Inside, the hospital smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. I walked straight to the front desk and gave my name. Zoe Avery. I'm here to see my brother, Tyler Avery. He was admitted to ICU. The receptionist glanced at her screen, then back at me with a polite but unreadable expression. Are you immediate family? I blinked. Yes, I'm his sister. She typed again, more slowly this time. I'm not seeing you listed on his emergency contact or next of kin forms. I'm sorry. I felt the heat rise to my face. I didn't even know he was here until yesterday. I just got off a red-eye from Oregon. Can I at least see him? She stood up and excused herself. A few minutes later, a nurse in soft green scrubs appeared and walked me over to a bench beside a vending machine. He's stable, she said gently, but he's been unconscious since they brought him in. No visitors have been recorded since he arrived. His wife hasn't been here much. I didn't know what to do with that. My throat tightened. No visitors? Not even her? She was listed, but we haven't seen her in several days. As I sat on the bench, a mix of emotions swirled in me. Confusion, frustration, sadness. I reached for my phone, needing some anchor. I clicked open Instagram without thinking. and that's when my stomach dropped. There she was, Sable, in a glittering black dress, posing on a rooftop club in Soho. The caption read, "A night to remember, hashtag girls night, hat finally free." The video autoplayed. She twirled in the camera, champagne in one hand, wind blowing her curls just right. Someone behind the camera laughed and said, "Where's your husband tonight?" Sable winked and raised her glass. "Technically alive, but that's subjective." I froze. Everything inside me stilled. The antiseptic scent of the hospital, the quiet beeping of machines behind doors. My brother, unconscious, alone, while his wife popped bottles and cracked jokes about him being halfway to dead. My hand trembled as I lowered the phone. She knew. She absolutely knew. And she didn't tell me. No one did. They all let me sit 2,500 miles away, thinking everything was fine, while the one person I loved most in this world slipped toward death. I sat there for what felt like hours. At some point, a nurse walked by and asked if I needed anything. I barely heard her. The world around me continued, but I wasn't in it. I hadn't even seen him yet, and already I knew nothing would ever be the same. By the time I stood from that bench outside the ICU, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The hallway hadn't changed. The same off-white walls, the same hum of fluorescent lights, the same cart of unopened snack packs near the nurse's station. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just a sister flying in out of state anymore. I was someone who had been shut out on purpose. I needed to see Tyler. I had to. I marched up to the nurse's station with a kind of urgency I wasn't used to showing strangers. "I need to see my brother. His name is Tyler Avery. He's in ICU. I just spoke with someone earlier." The nurse, young, hair pulled tight in a bun, glanced at her screen. She didn't look up as she said, "Are you his legal next of kin?" I tried not to let my frustration show. "I'm his sister." She paused her typing. "Unfortunately, you're not listed on the visitation log. I just flew here from Portland. No one even told me he was in the hospital. I only found out because his neighbor had the decency to call me." Her eyes softened for a moment, but only a moment. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Without his wife's permission or a prior designation on file, we can't authorize entry." I pulled out my wallet and offered my ID. See? Avery? Same last name. I have photos on my phone from our childhood, from last Thanksgiving." She gave a sympathetic look, the kind people reserve for toddlers who drop ice cream cones. "We can't break protocol." Of course not. Protocol was the law in hospitals, at least until someone powerful enough bent it. I stepped back, pressing my hand against the cool wall behind me. Across the corridor, I caught sight of an older nurse watching me, standing near a cart stacked with linens. She gave me a nod, subtle and slow, then tilted her head toward a supply door near the end of the hallway. It was barely noticeable, but I caught it. She moved her cart, quietly blocking the camera's view, and waited as I made my way to the door. She didn't say a word as she handed me a set of scrubs and pointed toward a utility closet. "You've got 2 minutes," she said, barely above a whisper. I whispered, "Thank you," and changed quickly, pulling the scrub top over my shirt. My hands trembled as I followed her down the hallway. She opened a side door that led into ICU and gave me a quick glance before turning back without another word. Tyler was in room 5. When I stepped inside, the sound of the machines swallowed me whole. There he was, my big brother. Tubes down his throat, wires all over his chest, his once strong hands limp on either side of the white sheets. The monitor beeped steadily, but the rhythm felt mechanical, not human. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, he was still tall, still broad-shouldered, but there was something in the stillness, the absence of his usual presence, that made him seem diminished. I moved to his side and touched his hand. It was cold, dry. "Tyler?" I whispered. His eyelids didn't move. His mouth stayed slack. But then, just for a second, his fingers twitched. It wasn't much. Maybe just a muscle spasm. But to me, it felt like a jolt straight to the heart. I sat there in silence, holding his hand until the nurse appeared again at the door. I nodded. She didn't say anything. She just waited. Back in the hallway, I changed out of the scrubs and folded them neatly. She took them, gave me one small nod, and turned back toward her cart. I stood outside ICU again, feeling like I had just come back from a battlefield no one saw me enter. That's when I saw her, Sable. She walked down the hallway like she owned the place, heels clicking against the tile, hair freshly curled, makeup flawless. Not a sign of grief on her face, just that effortless smugness she always carried like a designer handbag. When her eyes met mine, she didn't look surprised. She didn't even blink. "Look who finally showed up," she said. I kept my voice calm. "Why didn't you tell me?" She smiled, tight, polite, fake. "I didn't think you'd care. You're always wrapped up in your little freelance projects and wherever it is you live now." "Portland." "Right." "Oregon." She said it like it was a foreign country. I tried not to rise to the bait. "You didn't think I'd care that my brother was in ICU? You haven't been around, not since Mom's funeral." "I live across the country, Sable. That doesn't mean I stopped being his sister." She laughed, low and dry. "You always want to swoop in when things get dramatic, don't you? Save the day. But where were you during the last 2 years? When he had appointments, bills, arguments with Dad? You were in Oregon, writing blogs or whatever." "I was working, paying off student loans. And Tyler never said he didn't want me around." She stepped closer. "He didn't say much of anything, did he? Maybe that should tell you something." I clenched my jaw. "You had no right to keep this from me." Her smile faded. "I had every right. I'm his wife." A janitor pushed a mop past us. The hallway echoed with each squeak of the bucket wheel. I looked around. No one was going to step in. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I just want to be included." "Then maybe you should have been around when it counted." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked into the ICU. The automatic doors closed behind her with a hiss. I stood there, blinking back the sting in my eyes. I walked toward the window and looked in. Tyler lay in the same position. Still, quiet. His world full of machines and silent rooms, and me, just outside the glass, locked out of the room, locked out of his life. The keys felt foreign in my hand as I slid them into the lock of Tyler's apartment. The metal clicked, the door gave way with a slight push, and I stepped into a space that smelled like laundry detergent and old coffee grounds. Not the scent of sickness, not yet, just paused life. I hadn't been here since the Christmas before last. Back then, the place had been decked out with Sable's idea of minimalist holiday chic, white trees, gold ornaments, and scented candles that gave me a headache. Now it looked like time had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. A water glass sat on the end table, half full and dust-speckled. A jacket had been draped over the back of the couch and never moved again. There was mail stacked under the TV remote. He hadn't left intending not to return. I dropped my bag by the door and walked slowly, eyes scanning the silence. Every step I took made something ache in me. I knew I was looking for something, anything, to help me understand what the hell had happened between the brother I knew and the version of him who'd apparently never thought to name me on a hospital form. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Zoe?" The voice was male, familiar but older than I remembered. "This is she." "It's Milo Hartley. I used to work with your brother. Legal side. I saw your post from the hospital." "Milo," I repeated. "Yeah, I remember. Estate planning, right?" "Right. Look, I've been meaning to reach out sooner, but I wasn't sure how things were being handled. They're not well anyway." He cleared his throat. "Tyler talked to me a few weeks ago. He'd been thinking about updating his will." I paused mid-step. "He did?" "He didn't get around to it formally. No documents were signed, but he mentioned it, said he had concerns." "Concerns about what?" There was a pause, not long, but long enough to signal caution. "He wanted to make sure you were taken care of, that things didn't get misrepresented." I lowered myself onto the edge of the couch. So he knew. Knew what? That she'd try to erase me. I can't speak to intent, Zoe. All I know is he felt the need to re-clarify some things. He said, and I quote, "Legacy matters." especially when it's all that's left. I rubbed my eyes with the heel of my hand. Do you have anything in writing? Anything at all? Just the meeting notes from our last conversation. Informal, but they exist. Can you email them? Already on it. Thank you, Milo. Zoe, I want you to know. I've known your brother a long time. He didn't talk about many people with as much warmth as he did about you. I swallowed that down like gravel. Then why the silence? Why didn't he ever reach out? Maybe he thought he had more time. Or maybe someone convinced him he didn't need to. I hung up shortly after and sat in the stillness, letting that idea soak in. Tyler had tried. Maybe not loudly, maybe not perfectly, but he had tried, and Sable had made sure none of it surfaced. I stood and moved to his desk, opening drawers one by one. I found pens, receipts, and a few unopened bills. In the bottom drawer, tucked behind a manila folder labeled Retirement, was a half-filled notebook. His handwriting, Tyler's handwriting. There were lists, groceries, errands, mundane notes. But a few pages in, I found a short entry dated roughly 6 weeks ago. Call Milo. Need to clarify assets. Make sure Zoe gets what Mom would have wanted. My breath caught. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't dismissed me. He just hadn't gotten the chance. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. Instead, I felt something settle in me. A kind of clarity, a direction. I wasn't just going to mourn my brother. I was going to finish what he started. The next morning, I arranged to meet Milo at a cafe near the hospital. We sat in the corner, away from foot traffic, and he passed me a folder with a few typed notes inside. This is everything I've got. It's not official, but it shows intent. Do you think it'll hold up? I asked. Depends on the court, the judge, the lawyers. But if we find more, if there's anything else, emails, recordings, witnesses, it strengthens your case. I nodded slowly. And what happens if Sable gets wind that I'm looking into this? He looked up from his coffee. Then she'll try to get ahead of it, which means we work fast. The rest of the day blurred by in fragments. I went back to the apartment and photographed everything I found. I drafted a timeline. I even emailed my own attorney back in Oregon. I didn't go to the hospital that evening. I couldn't. I needed distance. I needed to think. But just before midnight, I found myself walking the length of Central Park, Tyler's notebook in my coat pocket, my boots scuffing the leaves. The air smelled like cold stone and pine needles. My mind replayed a moment from our last visit, 6 months ago, when we'd sat across from each other at a coffee shop near the Flatiron Building. He'd said, "There's a lot I want to fix, but not now." I remembered brushing it off, thinking it was about work or taxes. I hadn't asked. I should have. Now I knew better. As I stepped into the elevator of Tyler's building later that night, I whispered, "You wanted to fix something. I'll find out what." I stayed at Tyler's apartment that night. Something about being surrounded by his things, even untouched and collecting dust, was more comforting than any hotel could be. I needed to be close to his world, to what remained of it. To understand him now, I had to step into the space he left behind. The next morning, I brewed the last of the coffee in his kitchen cabinet. It was stale but strong, and I drank it black while flipping through unopened mail he hadn't sorted. Mostly credit card offers, 2 unpaid energy bills, and a flyer from a pet adoption center. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I got to a stack of folders near the bottom of the bookshelf by his desk. One manila folder caught my attention. The tab read simply, "Estate, pending." Inside, I found a printed email draft titled, "Request to amend will." I froze. The body of the email was short, typed without flair, but clear in its intent. Milo, I'd like to revisit the terms of my will. We need to make sure Zoe's protected. Call me when you can. There was no timestamp on the printed page, but based on the emails in the envelope and the other papers dated around mid-October, it must have been drafted just a few weeks before Tyler was hospitalized. He meant to change things. He meant to include me. The thought didn't feel like vindication. It felt like sorrow curling into certainty. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, my room once, and took a photo of the letter with my phone. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into my bag. Later that afternoon, I returned to the hospital. I didn't go straight to the ICU. Instead, I wandered down toward the vending machines. I hadn't eaten since early morning, but I wasn't there for food. I needed air, a quiet place to think. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes, and tried not to let the weight of everything crush me. "Miss Avery?" The voice came from my left. I turned and saw the older nurse, the one who had snuck me into Tyler's room that first day. She held a cup of tea and a slight smile. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said gently. I thought you might want to know. He said your name." My heart stuttered. "What?" "The night he came in, before he lost consciousness. Twice, I think. He said, 'Call my sister Zoe. She needs to know.'" She took a sip of her tea. "And then nothing after that." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "You're sure?" I asked. She nodded. "I've been doing this 20 years. I know when someone's lucid and when they're not." He meant it. I stood there, absorbing the weight of those words. All the silence, all the distance between us, all the excuses I'd built to explain away why he hadn't reached out. And still, he had remembered me. "He trusted me," I said quietly. "He did." The nurse didn't stay long. She patted my shoulder and walked off, giving me the dignity of grieving alone. I sat down on the bench next to the machine and pulled out my phone, opened notes. I needed to put it somewhere, this feeling, this truth that somehow survived everything else. He remembered me, he trusted me, that's enough for now. But not forever. I closed the app, took a breath, and stood. The sky had begun to shift outside, gold fading into gray, afternoon tipping toward evening. Back at Tyler's apartment, I paced for a while before deciding to do what I hadn't yet. Fully explore his home. Not just for paperwork, for answers. The kind that didn't come with headers or signatures. I went room by room. In the bathroom, I found a prescription bottle on the sink labeled for anti-anxiety medication. Filled, unopened. In the laundry room, a box of things packed but never shipped sat by the door. Addressed to me. In the living room, a photo on the wall, a picture of us at Mom's 60th birthday, had been replaced. The frame was the same, but now it was a photo of just him and Sable at a gala event. And then, in his office, behind the printer, I found another envelope. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a printed itinerary for an appointment with Milo, dated 2 days before Tyler collapsed, a handwritten reminder on a sticky note. "Bring Zoe into this. Call her first." I didn't need more proof. I already had it. But this was confirmation. Someone had stepped in before he could finish what he started. I took photos of everything, scanned what I could with my phone. Then I sat down and opened my laptop. I drafted an email to Milo, attaching every document and subject-lined it. Breadcrumbs, and they're leading somewhere. My phone buzzed before I could hit send. It was a message from the hospital. "Patient update. Condition remains critical. No new changes. Visitor list remains restricted." I stared at the screen. Sable. She hadn't just erased me from the documents. She was controlling access to his bedside, too. I called the nurse's desk, hoping, maybe, the rules had shifted. But no. "Sorry," the new receptionist said flatly. "Your name's not on the authorization list. We've confirmed it with his wife." I bit back the urge to yell. It wouldn't help. Instead, I said, "Thank you," hung up, and walked to the window. New York pulsed outside. Taxis, sirens, late-day shadows crawling up buildings. I was surrounded by a city that never stopped moving. And yet I felt like I was standing still. He had tried. He had remembered me. He had trusted me. And she, Sable, had gone to great lengths to erase all of it. But now, I had the trail, and I was going to follow it. Sable's voice still echoed in my head as I made my way back to Tyler's apartment. Her words had that exact kind of smirk laced beneath them that always made me want to either scream or laugh. "Do your worst." Spoken like someone who believed I wouldn't dare. The streetlights flickered on as I unlocked the front door. Inside, the apartment was still. The late afternoon sun stretched across the floor in long shadows, casting a dull glow over the coffee table and the empty water glass Tyler had likely set down the day everything stopped. I dropped my bag near the couch and sat quietly for a few moments, letting the rhythm of the city outside ground me again. I'd told her I'd print the truth if I had to. That wasn't a bluff. Later that evening, I decided to visit the hospital once more. There was something unfinished pressing on my chest, something I couldn't name yet. I wasn't allowed back into Tyler's room, but I needed proximity, needed to feel like I was still connected in some small, invisible way. So I showed up just before shift change, when the nurses were rotating and things felt a little less rigid. As I lingered by the corridor that led to ICU, my eyes were drawn to a framed photo on the wall, hanging just outside the double doors. It was a family portrait, black and white, professionally shot. Tyler was front and center, smiling in a way he rarely did in posed photos. Beside him stood Sable, her hand on his chest like she was staking claim. Their silhouettes were crisp, perfectly lit, polished. But something was off. I stepped closer. I knew this photo. I had a copy of the original on my fridge at home. Except, I had been in it. I had been standing right there, on the other side of Tyler, his arm draped around my shoulder. It was one of the only photos we'd taken since Mom passed. It was a rare good day, and now I was gone. Whoever edited the image had done it masterfully. You couldn't tell anything had been cropped, unless, of course, you knew what used to be there. Me. Pretty, isn't it? A voice said behind me. I turned to find a young nurse refilling a cart nearby. She glanced at the picture with a polite smile. Sable brought that in a few weeks ago. Said it was their favorite. Their favorite? I repeated, slowly. Yeah. She told us it was just the two of them, no other family close enough to include. The comment hit me like ice to the spine. I thanked the nurse with a nod and walked slowly back down the hallway, my hands clenched tight. It wasn't just hospital paperwork. It wasn't just access lists. She was rewriting everything, erasing me from his life, one frame at a time. I waited by the ICU entrance. She always arrived around this hour, never early, always looking like she'd stepped out of a catalog. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, there she came, heels tapping lightly, coffee in hand, face unreadable. I stepped into her path before she reached the doors. We need to talk, I said. She sighed, glanced at her watch. Make it quick. I have 10 minutes before the next briefing. I pointed to the framed photo behind us. Where am I in that picture, Sable? She blinked, playing dumb. What picture? Don't insult me. You know exactly which one. You cropped me out, didn't you? She rolled her eyes. It wasn't about you. It was about us. Tyler and me. That photo is ours. He wasn't yours to edit, I said. That memory belonged to all of us. She scoffed. You're being dramatic. It's a hallway picture, not a Supreme Court filing. No, I said sharply. It's symbolic. You've removed me from every part of his life, and you're not even subtle about it. Maybe because you made it easy, she snapped. You disappeared, years ago. I moved. That's not the same thing. And you knew he wanted to reconnect. She shrugged. People say a lot of things when they're sick. You rewrote him, I said, voice low, trembling. You cut me out. Her expression didn't change. I'm his wife. That's the role that matters. We stood in a stare-down for what felt like an eternity. The hallway was quieter than usual. A few nurses moved in the distance, but no one intervened. You're not just managing his care, I said. You're managing his memory. Someone has to, she replied coolly. And clearly, that someone isn't you. That was it. My patience snapped, not with a scream, not with a scene, but with a clarity I didn't expect. I'm going to make sure this doesn't stay buried, I said, my voice steady. If you keep erasing him and me, I will make sure the truth isn't just whispered. It'll be printed, public, and permanent. She tilted her head. You'd do that to your own family? I looked her dead in the eye. No, but I'd do it to you. Sable stepped back, coffee cup still in hand, and gave a condescending smile. Do your worst. She turned and walked through the ICU doors without another word. I stood there a moment longer, letting the words hang between us like smoke. Then I whispered, "I intend to." That night, back at the apartment, I couldn't sleep. I got up around midnight and began rummaging through the cabinets again, searching for anything, receipts, documents, messages, that might be the next breadcrumb. That's when I found it. An old file folder tucked behind a row of manuals in the hallway closet. Inside, labeled envelopes, a couple of flash drives, and one worn notebook. And sitting right on top, exactly where it needed to be, was the first weapon. It was just past 2 a.m. when I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, the contents of Tyler's hallway closet spread around me like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was building. The folder I'd found earlier that night, stuffed behind old insurance manuals and a broken umbrella, had turned out to be a gold mine, or a landmine, probably both. The envelope on top had a return address from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. I unfolded the contents carefully, like they might disintegrate if I breathed too hard. Inside was a faxed copy of a transfer form. It was a request for Tyler's care to be moved from outpatient oncology at a local clinic to Sloan's specialized treatment unit. The signature line was blank. Date? 5 days before he collapsed. No signatures, no approval, just dust. I set the paper down on the coffee table and stared at it, the corners curling upward slightly. My chest ached, not in the metaphorical way. It physically hurt, tight, sharp, because what I held in my hand was not just a missed opportunity, it was a confirmation. He had tried to fight, and someone had stalled him long enough to cost him the chance. I moved through the rest of the folder, financial statements, a few scattered medical notes, and one post-it that said, "Ask Sable Rescheduling." The handwriting was unmistakably Tyler's, blocky, impatient, rushed. My pulse climbed. Something felt wrong about the timeline. The gap between that request and his hospitalization was only a few days, and yet no one had followed up. No appointments logged, no responses. I knew the system was slow, but Tyler was never passive about his health. He was methodical. He followed up. He'd been living with early-stage cancer for almost 2 years. He didn't just forget to sign papers, unless someone made sure they weren't signed. I moved next to his desk and stared at the blinking router light under the cabinet. Tyler had always been meticulous about home security. He had a full system installed after someone broke into a neighbor's apartment 3 years ago. Cameras in the entryway, hallway, even one facing the street. I knew this because he'd bragged about it at Thanksgiving, walking me through the app on his phone. I crawled behind the cabinet and checked the DVR box. It was new. Too new. The label on the back still had its barcode. I flipped it and found the install sticker. Date: May 17th. The same day Tyler had been rushed to the ER. My stomach sank. I opened the console drawer and found the user manual. The old box, the one Tyler had been using, wasn't anywhere in sight. Not under the desk, not in storage, not in the trash. Nothing. Gone. I stood slowly, letting the realization settle in my bones. Sable had replaced the system, all of it, every recording, every piece of footage from the week leading up to his collapse, erased. If there had been a conversation, a call, an argument, anything between them about his treatment, it was gone. And not just gone, intentionally scrubbed. This wasn't passive neglect. This was active removal. I took photos of the install sticker, the equipment box, and emailed them to Milo with a short message. We have a new date to consider. System replaced the day he was hospitalized. Also, found unsigned transfer forms. Connecting dots. I didn't wait for a reply. I spent the next few hours cataloging everything I found. I created folders on my laptop. Legal, personal, emotional. Each item I scanned went into one or more of them. I tagged them with notes and timestamps. There was no room for confusion later. This wasn't grief anymore. It was strategy. Just before dawn, I made myself a cup of stale instant coffee and stood by the window, watching the skyline wake up. In the haze of sleeplessness, I whispered, She changed the locks. But he left me the keys. The next day passed in a blur. I didn't go to the hospital. I needed distance to think, to plan. Around noon, Milo called. "Got the files," he said. "This is substantial." "She wiped the video history," I told him. "There's no other reason to change the system that day." "She's going to deny it." "She always does." There was silence for a few seconds. "Zoe, you're not just building a case. You're building a storm." "Then she better start building a roof." I could hear the grin in his voice. "We'll need statements. That nurse from day one, do you think she'd be willing to talk?" "I'll find her." We spent the next 10 minutes creating a short list of people who could confirm Tyler's intent. People who'd seen us together, heard him mention me. Anything to prove that Sable's claim that he had no meaningful ties beyond her was a lie. That night, I returned to Tyler's apartment and sat at his desk. I opened the file folders again, laid them out across the surface, and realized how carefully he had documented everything. His appointments, his prescriptions, his insurance claims. It was all there. He had been preparing. He had trusted the system. He hadn't counted on her, and neither had I. As I began writing a formal statement, my own account of what had happened, from the first call to the edited photo, I heard the ding of my inbox. It was a forwarded message from Milo, with the subject line, "Legal memo, urgent update." Inside was a response from a firm Sable had retained. She'd lawyered up. Quickly, Milo had flagged one line in yellow. "Any public statements made by the sister-in-law will be considered defamatory and subject to response." I leaned back in my chair. She knew. She knew I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was digging. And now she was pushing back. But what she didn't know, what she still couldn't understand, was that I wasn't scared. I was prepared. She erased everything she thought mattered. But she forgot one thing. I was still here. By the time I stepped out of the Uber and stood in front of the glass entry to the penthouse event, the Manhattan sky had already faded into navy. The doorman, dressed in a suit too stiff for the kind of warmth you'd hope for on a night like this, held a clipboard and eyed me the moment I reached the lobby entrance. "Name?" he asked without looking up. "Zoe Avery." He scanned the list, once, then again. He looked up. "You're not on the guest list." "Of course not." My throat tightened, but I kept my posture calm. "I'm his sister." "I understand, ma'am," he said, his tone firm, "but I can't let you up unless your name's on the list." I leaned slightly to glance at the paper, scanning the crisp black font for anything that even resembled my name. Dozens of guests, all carefully curated, and not a single mention of me. "She planned this," I murmured, more to myself than him. "This wasn't an oversight." "I'm sorry," he added, though there wasn't a flicker of real apology in his voice. I stepped back and looked up toward the windows lining the 32nd floor. Light spilled out. Laughter filtered down in waves. The soft hum of clinking glasses. I could make out silhouettes near the glass balcony, some holding drinks, some taking selfies. It was a celebration, but not of my brother's life. It was a tribute to her version of it. I moved around the side of the building, toward the valet ramp, and found a shaded space beside a decorative planter. From there, I could see inside the main event hall. There was a projector screen glowing at the front of the room, images slowly transitioning in silence. The slideshow. I squinted. The photos were curated with precision. Tyler at his college graduation, a hiking trip in Colorado, charity events, black tie galas. Every single frame featured Sable, arm in arm, centered, smiling, always smiling. Not one photo showed me, not one. I was nowhere in the life he apparently lived. Not in childhood, not holidays, not even family trips I had planned myself. I watched as a new photo slid into view. Tyler and Sable posing outside a vineyard. I had taken that picture. I remembered the day, the argument that morning, the way he had asked me to come even after she said no. And now, I was nothing more than a pair of hands behind the lens. Inside, the guests clapped. I saw Sable rise from her table and walk to the microphone. She looked radiant, not in mourning, not even pretending. She wore a white fitted dress, her hair in soft curls, a glass of wine in her hand. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice gentle but practiced. "Tonight is about honoring the quiet strength Tyler brought into every room. He believed in privacy, in dignity, and in keeping those closest to his heart exactly where they belonged, in his inner circle." A few nods from the crowd. "Tyler didn't like drama," she continued. "He always said, the past is a place we can't live in, and I've chosen to honor that." She looked right through the window, her gaze brushing past me like I was invisible. That was the moment I felt something inside me shift, the kind of clarity that doesn't shout. It whispers, cold and steady. She wasn't just controlling his image, she was rewriting history. I turned away, fists clenched, and began walking back toward the street when I felt a small tug on the sleeve of my coat. "Excuse me," came a timid voice. I looked down to find a boy, maybe 10 or 11, staring up at me. Brown curls, oversized coat, scuffed sneakers, familiar face. "You're Zoe, right?" he asked. "Yes," I said, cautious. "I live on the same floor as Mr. Avery, your brother. He used to give me gummy bears." My heart cracked a little. "That sounds like him." The boy hesitated. "He asked me to mail something for him once, a letter, but she said I shouldn't." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "The lady with the black purse. She told me not to touch his stuff, that I'd get in trouble." My voice dropped. "Do you still have it?" He nodded, pulled off his backpack, and rummaged inside. After a moment, he held out a slightly crumpled white envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable. My name, scrawled in Tyler's blocky, always too big letters. "Thank you," I whispered. I sat on the stone ledge near a planter and carefully opened the envelope. The letter inside was only a few lines long, written in blue ink on plain paper. "Zoe, I'm sorry, I should have called. If I get better, I'll fix this. If not, please forgive me, and don't let her erase you. I didn't cry, I didn't collapse." I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into my coat pocket like it was something holy. The boy stood beside me, watching. "She lied about everything," I said quietly. He nodded. "She told my mom you were just a cousin." I laughed, short and humorless. "Of course she did." "Are you going to tell people?" he asked. "I'm going to do more than that." I thanked him again and walked slowly back toward the front of the building. The doorman saw me approach and straightened, but I didn't ask to go in. I didn't need to. I looked up at the windows one last time. "You made him vanish," I whispered, fingers brushing the envelope in my pocket. "Now I'll make you visible for who you really are." The morning after the penthouse memorial, I met Milo in the quiet back room of a community center library just 3 blocks from the hospital. He'd booked it for us, neutral ground. No upscale coffee shop where someone might overhear, no law office where Sable's people might already be sniffing, just wood-paneled walls, a flickering ceiling light, and a long table already covered in papers. Milo greeted me with a nod, but no small talk. He was already deep in his notes. I pulled out the letter from Tyler, the one the boy had handed me, and placed it in the center of the table like it was a final puzzle piece. He read it once, then twice, eyes narrowing at the line. "Don't let her erase you." "That's not just a personal note," he said. "That's a recorded intent." I nodded. "He tried to reach me." She intercepted it. Milo tapped the page. "This, combined with the will draft, the unsigned transfer, the wiped security drive. Zoe, you've got more than motive. You've got a story." But courts take months, maybe years, and she's still out there acting like she's the grieving widow. Milo leaned back in his chair. "What are you thinking?" I reached into my bag, pulled out the small USB drive, and placed it next to the letter. "I'm thinking we stop asking for permission." He stared at it. "Is that what I think it is?" Tyler recorded it before he went into ICU. It was meant to go to you, but it ended up on his home desktop. "I found it yesterday morning." "Have you watched it?" "Once. That was enough." Milo picked it up gently. "And you want to go public?" "Tonight." He blinked. "You sure about that?" I met his eyes. The truth needs to be louder than her lies. He gave me a long look, then nodded slowly. All right, then we do it right. We spent the next hour assembling everything into a single, undeniable timeline. Milo printed physical packets, one for legal records, one for media if needed. He drafted a short statement in case the press got hold of the story, and I drafted something else. A simple introduction, one I planned to give myself. Later that evening, I changed into black jeans and a gray turtleneck. No makeup, no heels, just clarity. I walked to the venue where the after-party reception was being held, an art space downtown Sable had rented for the private toast to Tyler's legacy. Candles lined the floor. A soft jazz trio played in the background. Everything looked curated. Beautiful, expensive. When I stepped through the glass doors, the room fell noticeably quiet. A few guests whispered. Others looked away. Sable, standing by the bar in an off-the-shoulder silk gown, froze when she saw me. I didn't stop walking. I moved directly toward the AV booth, where a young technician stood adjusting lighting cues. I need 5 minutes on the screen, I said calmly. He looked confused. Do you have approval? I do now, Milo said, appearing behind me and holding up a signed release form. Legal rep, make the switch. The tech hesitated, glanced over at Sable. Her expression was a mix of panic and performance, like she was trying to decide if she should object or pretend this was always part of the plan. I walked to the front of the room, USB drive in hand. Someone muted the music. I stepped up to the microphone. My heart pounded, but my voice didn't shake. This isn't about me, I said. This is from him. I plugged in the drive. The screen flickered. The room fell silent. The video began. Tyler sat in his living room, wearing a sweatshirt I recognized from our childhood. His face was tired, paler than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp. He looked directly into the camera. If you're seeing this, he began, then I didn't make it. A gasp rippled through the room. He continued. I've made mistakes. One of them was letting people speak for me when I should have spoken for myself. His voice was even, but quiet. There are things I meant to say to my sister, things I didn't get the chance to fix. Zoe, if you're watching this, know that I tried. I'm sorry. And to anyone else listening, if she's still pretending, don't let her. The video cut to black. No music followed. No applause. Just silence. I stepped back from the mic. No further explanation. No need. Milo moved through the room and handed Sable a printed folder. She took it with trembling hands. Consider yourself served, he said simply. Whispers spread like wildfire. A woman near the back pulled out her phone and began recording. Another turned and left without saying a word. Someone asked, "Is that real?" And someone else answered, "It was his voice." It had to be. Sable stood frozen, the same way she had frozen me out. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was as the room slowly emptied, some guests offering me tight-lipped nods, others looking away. That didn't matter either. Because for once, finally, people had heard the truth. She had the spotlight for years. Tonight, she had to share it. With the truth. The morning after the memorial, I woke to silence. Not the kind that weighs heavy like guilt or buzzes like tension. Just quiet. A stillness that felt earned. I made myself coffee in my new apartment. A small one-bedroom walk-up near Central Park, still mostly boxes and unframed memories. No marble countertops, no curated art. Just me and space. That was enough. While the water boiled, I glanced at my phone. Overnight, the clip of Tyler's message had gone viral. Someone had filmed the entire thing from their seat near the buffet table and posted it on TikTok. From there, it had been picked up by 3 blogs, then 2 mid-tier news outlets. By 8 a.m., my inbox was flooded. Some were from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins, old colleagues, even an ex from college who'd seen the clip and wanted to tell me how brave I was. But most came from strangers, nurses, adult children, siblings like me. One message read, "Thank you. My brother passed alone last year. His wife kept us away. Watching you say what I couldn't, it helped." Another. I didn't even know people like you existed, people who fight quietly, but powerfully. I read every single one. By the time I finished my coffee, I had already decided something. I couldn't let this end at a viral moment. That afternoon, Milo met me in the library conference room where we'd first pieced the case together. He wore a rare smile and carried a small stack of paperwork. "The State Ethics Board is opening a formal inquiry," he said as he handed me the documents. "They're looking into her withholding the transfer request?" He nodded. "And the edited visitation lists, and the deleted footage. They can't charge her with criminal neglect, but the medical board might suspend her rights as a healthcare proxy in future filings." I flipped through the pages slowly. "And the estate?" I asked. The supporting documents were enough. Tyler's intentions were clear. The will is being amended under a probate exception. She'll get a small settlement, but most of the estate is yours now. I didn't react. Money was never the point. Milo paused, then added, "You should know, her firm's lost almost every client since the clip aired, and the Times is running a piece next week. Working title, 'The Widow Who Vanished the Sister.'" A breath left me, half a sigh, half relief. She's not pressing back? No. She disappeared from the city 2 days ago, deleted social media. Lawyers say she's stepping away for personal reasons. Personal reasons. For a woman who once lived through filters and photo ops, silence must have been louder than prison. I thanked him, and we parted ways on the corner. He offered me a ride. I declined. I wanted to walk. Let the city remind me that not everything disappears when you look away. Later that week, I filed the papers for the Tyler Foundation. It wasn't big, just a non-profit account and a website, but the mission was simple: help siblings who've been pushed aside during end-of-life care, offer legal resources, tell their stories, tell our stories. My first blog post was titled, "Being the Sister Who Stayed Out of Frame." It received 4,000 shares in a week. I included the photo. The original one, Tyler, Sable, and me. No one cropped out. I kept that framed copy on my desk, next to a small potted succulent and a notebook full of draft essays. I was writing again, not just about loss, but about living, about what it means to speak when everyone expects your silence. A few weeks later, on a cool Sunday morning, I passed by Mount Sinai on my walk home from the market. I hadn't planned to stop, but I did. I stood across the street, looking up at the floor I once fought to enter. The windows reflected the sky, calm and cloudless. A nurse pushed a wheelchair out to the sidewalk. A man in a faded baseball cap waited beside the cab. Life went on, as it always does. I opened my journal. On a fresh page, I wrote, "He didn't leave me. He just couldn't stay." I closed it and walked on. Time didn't fill the wound, but it had taught me how to carry it. One afternoon in late spring, I visited a small community center that had reached out to the Tyler Foundation about funding. They were hosting a wellness fair for young adults in the foster system, and someone had printed Tyler's story to hand out as part of a campaign on medical advocacy. I wasn't expecting to see it in use. Certainly not laminated and held in the hands of a girl no older than 20, sitting cross-legged on the floor near the window. She read it slowly, lips moving as she absorbed each word. When she looked up and noticed me, she tilted her head and asked, "Did you know him?" I smiled. "Yes," I said. "I did. And he knew me too." Sometimes justice doesn't come in the form of courtroom verdicts. It comes in truth finally being heard, even if it's whispered after everyone else has stopped listening. Zoe didn't win because she was loud. She won because she didn't give up, even when her own family tried to erase her. Have you ever been pushed aside in your own family? Left out of the story on purpose? If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life inspired stories that cut deep and stay with you.